And then April C. sent in. Long time no hear from, April. Hi, Matt. Did anyone find the answer for Dave's question on Tristan and Isolde? I think I found the answer to Dave's question about Tristan and Isolde. There was a video on YouTube that went over the story. Essentially, in life, their love was a sin of adultery and a betrayal of both their honor and commitment to the king. But in death, they were ennobled, two trees eternally intertwined. Tristan was sent to retrieve Isolde for his uncle. Isolde's mother didn't trust the enemy king, so she whined with a love potion. I think there's a few words missing there, but I think we get the idea. So we'll just leave it at, so she whined with a love potion. Tristan and Isolde were attracted to each other, but their honor kept them from acting on it until they accidentally drank the love potion laced with wine and fornicated. Isolde still married the king, but snuck out at night to meet with Tristan. Yeah, see, I did look at a fair amount of what they had on it online. This is the first time I read they were ennobled, two trees eternally intertwined. So they were reincarnated as trees. That would definitely apply to the reference as it played out. What's interesting to me is that this was Lee Falk saying, in the moment, my God, the man thinks this is Tristan and Isolde. Definitely that's what's happened. Ham Fisher and Al Cap are eternally intertwined, like two trees with their branches merging. But Lee Falk wouldn't have known that at the time of Ham Fisher's suicide. So let's move on. Matt says, I looked in my copy of the Ultimate Encyclopedia of Mythology, and while there are entries on Tristan and Isolde, there's also entries on every other character in the story too. I decided that rather than scan all the relevant entries, it'd probably be easier to just send the book up to the Off-White House. So Dave, if you want it, let me know. No, I think we're reaching Tristan and Isolde saturation, but definitely worth keeping the visit going, at least to this point, with Matt Goes On. The other thing I found was Richard Wagner did an opera about Tristan and Isolde, and that was first performed in 1865. From Wikipedia. In 1832, Gaetano Donizetti referred to this story in his opera Les Elixirs d'Amour, the Elixir of Love, or the Love Potion, in Milan. The character Adina sings the story to the ensemble, inspiring Nemorino to ask the charlatan Duke Almara for the magic elixir. Premiering in 1865, Richard Wagner's influential opera Tristan and Isolde depicts Tristan as a doomed romantic figure, while Isolde fulfills Wagner's quintessential feminine role as the redeeming woman. Swiss composer Frank Martin wrote the chamber opera intended as an oratorio, Le Vin Elbe, between 1938 and 1940. Thomas Hardy published his one-act play, The Famous Tragedy of the Queen of Cornwall at Tintagel in Lyonesse, in 1923. Rutland Boughton's 1924 opera, The Queen of Cornwall, was based on Thomas Hardy's play. I think we start to see the unusual quality of this, that the points differ because everybody's riffing on mythology. If there is a seminal Tristan and Isolde myth, it's definitely gotten garbled in with everybody else riffing on it over the centuries. Thomas Hardy's Plays Wiki says, the famous tragedy of the Queen of Cornwall, or to give it its full title, and here we go, the famous tragedy of the Queen of Cornwall at Tintagel in Lyonesse, a new version of an old story arranged as a play for mummers in one act, requiring no theater or scenery, is a verse tragedy by Thomas Hardy based on the medieval legend of Tristan and Iseult. His last substantial creative work, it was written, published, and first performed by an amateur group, the Hardy Players, in 1923 and revised in 1924. It is now seldom performed and has had a mixed reception from critics. In 1924, it was adapted as an opera by Rutland Boughton. Synopsis. After a prologue by Merlin. Okay, this is the first time I've read Merlin associated with this. The play proper opens with King Mark of Cornwall and his queen Iseult returning to Tintagel from separate sea voyages. We learn that Queen Iseult has traveled toward Brittany to find her old lover Tristram. Okay, this is the first time that we've read this was her old lover, whom she believed to be dying and has called off her voyage only on hearing a false report that he was already dead. Like I said, I read a bunch of this online. This is the first time for all of this. Suspicious of his wife, Mark has his man Andre keep watch on her. Tristram now comes to Tintagel disguised as a harper and contrives to meet the queen alone. Tristram's wife is Isolde the White-Handed. I do remember reading that part. It's like, oh, there's two Isoldes. Also arrives in search of her husband and tries to persuade him to return home. Mark discovers Tristram's presence and fatally stabs him in the back. The queen picks up the same dagger and kills Mark with it, then throws herself off the castle walls to her own death. Iseult the White-Handed enters, discovers the bodies, and sets off on her homeward journey. The epilogue is again spoken by Merlin. Okay. This is tending in the direction of Dante's Inferno. That Dante's Inferno has absolutely nothing to do with hell as described in the Bible. And Gustave Doré's prints have nothing to do with Dante's Inferno. What is this lunatic quality to some of these things? Composition and publication. The history of the play goes back as far as 1870. Nyuk, nyuk, nyuk. I'm willing to bet if you applied yourself and had your algorithm scrape the internet real good, you'd probably find yourself back before 1870 in no time. When Hardy, living for a short time in Cornwall, began his courtship of Emma Lavinia Gifford, the woman who was to become his first wife, and visited the ruins of Tintagel Castle with her. The version of the Tristan legend he then began to plan only started to take solid form in September 1916, after Emma's death, when he visited Tintagel along with his second wife, Florence. Okay, so we got two wives here, and we've also got two Isoldes. It's all making a strange kind of sense, but not in anything I could put into words. Though he soon put this project aside, he resumed it in 1923, finished a first draft in April of that year, and completed the play in August 1923. It was published on 15 November and appreciatively reviewed by the critics. A second and slightly expanded edition with a different numeration of the scenes followed in September 1924. Then we have a picture of Thomas Hardy attending a rehearsal of The Queen of Cornwall at the Corn Exchange, Dorchester. The first performance of the play was given by the Hardy Players, an amateur troupe in Dorchester, and was intended to star their leading actress, Gertrude Bugler, though her pregnancy prevented this. Hardy himself was closely involved in the production, as was Harley Granville Barker, an eminent theatrical figure to whom Hardy sent an early copy of the script and who responded with appreciative criticism of the play itself and of the approach to it of the Hardy Players, one of whose rehearsals he attended. The play was performed at the Corn Exchange in Dorchester on 28, 29, and 30 November 1923, and the Hardy Players then took the production to London to be played at King George's Hall on 21 February the following year. It was also performed in Bournemouth on 25 April 1924. Reviews noted the difficulties presented to amateur actors by the play's archaic style. The Daily Telegraph noting that, I got to ask the question there, archaic style relative to 1870 or archaic style going back how far, which then enters into how far back does this go? How far back was Hardy looking, going, okay, I'm going to riff on this guy's style of playwriting because I want this to be a play for the ages. And the Hardy Players then took the production to London to be played at King George's Hall on 21 February the following year. It was also performed in Bournemouth on 25 April 1924. Right. Reviews noted the difficulties presented to amateur actors by the play's archaic style. The Daily Telegraph noting that, quote, the Hardy Players did their best, but they succeeded not at all in getting down into the depths of passion, which this play might reveal in the hands of a fine professional company under a producer of mark. Okay, so it was performed badly, but they're not faulting Hardy. Even Hardy's wife, Florence, could only claim that these had been, quote, more or less overcome, unquote, while admitting that the Hardy Players were better in rustic comedies. There was also a private performance by the students of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art on 1st April 1924. There have been very few productions, though the play was notably performed on BBC Radio on 28 February 1956, repeated the following April, with Mary Morris as Queen Iseult, Rachel Gurney as Iseult, the White-Handed, and incidental music by Norman Demuth. I'm sure this has nothing to do with the fact that Diana Schutz was born 1st February 1955, and Susan Alston was born April 1st, 1955. So we'll just leave that alone completely. The dramatic form of The Queen of Cornwall was influenced by Hardy's respect for the conventions of Greek tragedy. Aha! We're getting to the nub of it now. Manly Matt Dow. Aristotle, in his Poetics, lays down that the underscored the action should all take place in the same place and within a period of 24 hours. End of underscore. And it's like, well, if anybody should know, I guess Aristotle should know. Hardy followed both of these rules, and indeed the action of his play is in one unbroken sequence, operating in real time, kind of like this answer. He also employed a chorus to comment on the unfolding plot, though he called them chanters. The plot is taken from the Tristan and Iseult legend as it was told and retold in medieval and modern literature. As it was told, I think you're going to find out that it didn't get told the same way right from the beginning, and we're now so far away from whatever it was in the beginning. We're probably completely wasting our time. No, I'll be a little more definitive. We are wasting our time. His medieval sources have been identified as the romances of Thomas of Britain, Gottfried von Strasbourg, and Sir Thomas Malory. The influence of Gottfried von Strasbourg's Tristan has also been detected in Tess of the Uberville and Jude the Obscure. The original medieval form of the Tristan legend has not survived. That's a nice way of putting it. But an attempt to reconstruct it was made by the 19th century scholar Joseph Bédier, and Hardy is known to have owned a copy of the English translation of Bédier's work. In a letter, Hardy wrote that he had, quote, tried to avoid turning the rude personages of, say, the 5th century into respectable Victorians, as was done by Tennyson, Swinburne, Arnold, etc., unquote. Them's fighting words. Do they think that their personages were rude? Or did they think of them as the same as respectable Victorians, just from another time period? The works he was reacting against were Tennyson's The Last Tournament, 1871, part of Tennyson's Idylls of the King, Swinburne's Tristram of Lyonesse, 1882, and Arnold's Tristram and Iseult, 1852. The two former poems concentrate on Tristram's role in the story. It is only Arnold who, like Hardy, concentrates his attention on Queen Iseult and his sympathy on Iseult the White-Handed. Well, there's a pick for you. Hardy's device of framing the story with two monologues by Merlin is not unlike R.S. Hawker's in his The Quest for the Sangreal, in which Merlin, by his magic art, produces a vision for King Arthur of the Quest. The critic Dennis Taylor further finds the play to be, quote, full of both Shelleyan and Wagnerian echoes, unquote. One further source for the Queen of Cornwall can be found in Hardy's own novel, A Pair of Blue Eyes, 1873, of which he in one scene quotes from extensively. Autobiographical elements. The famous tragedy of the Queen of Cornwall, completed when Hardy was in his 80s and married to his second wife, was inspired by memories of his courtship of his first wife. In 1916, when Hardy was turning over ideas for the play in his mind, he told a friend that, quote, I visited Tintagel 44 years ago with an Iseult of my own, and of course she was mixed in the vision of the other, unquote. Yeah, hard to disagree with that. It is, however, difficult to pin down autobiographical elements in the play. The white robe and the, quote, corn brown hair, unquote, of Iseult the White-Handed recall Emma Hardy, as does Tristram's description of Queen Iseult as, quote, Lily Rose, unquote. The fact that Hardy fell in love with Emma while still engaged to another woman, Tryphena Sparks, may possibly be reflected in the depiction of a Tristram torn between his love for two Iseults. Yeah, that'd do it. Some critics have also argued that the marital strains in the latter years of Hardy's marriage to Emma find expression in Queen Iseult's bitterness towards Tristram. Style. The verse style of the Queen of Cornwall has been variously described as, quote, plain and archaic, in conformity with an unsophisticated age, unquote, and as employing, quote, an ironic compression, classically laconic, with a convoluted brevity, more in the manner of Browning, unquote. The fact that Hardy describes it on the title page as, quote, a play for mummers, unquote, may explain the literary style he employed, as it certainly dictates the simplicity of staging he envisaged. The stage was to be, quote, any large room, unquote, without sets or scenery, unless it was being played in an actual theater. Reception, Matt, he said, stalling for time as he tries to grab the next page. The famous tragedy of the Queen of Cornwall is not often read and is still less often staged. It has been seen as a minor work and has received less critical attention than many of Hardy's writings. Indeed, some biographies ignore it entirely. It has been considered, quote, heavy-going, unquote, quote, a work of little distinction, dull and weak, unquote, quote, never excitingly dramatic or highly lyrical, unquote, quote, too brief for the development of great tragedy, unquote, and, quote, an undistinguished work, unquote. Ivor Browne, in one of the original reviews of the play, complained of its, quote, combination of rare and strained words with a prosaic diction that approaches bathos, unquote. And likewise, modern critics have called the verse style, quote, clotted, unquote, quote, workmanlike rather than inspired, unquote, and, quote, lacking any rich metaphorical or prosodic vitality, unquote. Yet some critics have found in the play theatrical virtues to offset its shortcomings as verse. A.L. Rouse considered it, quote, a curious little work, easy to underestimate or misconceive, unquote, and suggested that it would benefit from the visual and sound effects of the Cornish coastline, possible in a filmed version. Raymond H. Thompson praised its, quote, firm structure and dramatic power, unquote. Robert Giddings thought it was, quote, on its own terms, a considerable achievement, unquote, and believed that, quote, the dramatic power, even in awkward phrases, was unmistakable, unquote. Harold Orell wrote that, quote, overall the elaborateness of the rhythms, or the elaborateness of the rhymes, the occasional soaring eloquence, and Hardy's continuing control of theatrical elements are impressive. There are several moments of dark beauty that finally stir in the audience a genuine sense of pity for the plight of Iseult the White-Handed, unquote. Beverly Taylor and Elizabeth Brewer thought it a domestic rather than a romantic tragedy of considerable power, while conceding that it, quote, lacks tragic depth, lacks even pathos, unquote. They believed Hardy gave the story an ending impressively different and more dramatic than do most others, unquote. Adaptation. There swiftly followed a two-act music drama, The Queen of Cornwall, by the English composer Rutland Boughton. The libretto consisted of Hardy's play cut in places, reworded or rearranged in others, and with the addition of 6 pre-existing poems by Hardy, quote, when I set out for Lioness, unquote, quote, the end of the episode, unquote, quote, bereft she thinks she dreams, unquote, quote, if it's ever spring again, unquote, quote, Beanie Cliff, unquote, and quote, Spot, unquote. It was first performed on 21 August 1924. Some sources incorrectly say 26 August instead of 21. See, I see problems there. At the Glastonbury Festival, was toured to Bath and Bournemouth in April 1925 and was revived at the 1925 and 1926 Glastonbury Festivals and again on 13 January 1927 in Liverpool. In 1935, the BBC broadcast a performance conducted by Albert Coates. There was a further production of it in October 1963 at the St. Pancras Festival in London. Matt says there's more I could send, but we're at 19 pages and I haven't even finished getting all the questions. So Dave, if this doesn't answer where Lee Falk was coming from for you, I'll keep digging. No, I don't think we're going to find that. It's it meant one thing to Lee Falk. It meant another thing, I'm sure, to the New York reporter who recorded his comment in the newspaper story. It would have meant another thing to Al Cap, and it means another thing to posterity. What it meant to Dave Sim, I will now go and get the Strange Death of Alex Raymond page in question. Okay, Strange Death of Alex Raymond, page 670. In my view, Cap's obscene, self-exalting grandiosity and Falk's choice of analogy, a medieval legend whose most recent dramatization had been the 1943 Vichy France film L'Éternel Retour, The Eternal Return, attest to the perceptual limitations of each. Orders of magnitude, behold, below what was actually taking place. That is, suicide ennobles nothing, let alone a feud, and a dramatization is the polar opposite of a metaphysical enactment. Neither, in my opinion, amenable to or conducive of a saving grace. It's like paganism can only take you so far. Drama can only take you so far. A saving grace comes only from God.